Talk about everything sports. It's the Sideline Report on your hometown radio station, WPKY, The Tiger. And good morning to each and every one of you. It's Thursday, and that means it's the Sideline Report here on your hometown radio station, WPKY, brought to you by the Times Leader, Todd Griffin, sports editor of the Times Leader in studio. Good morning.
Good morning. It's once again a busy week in sports, and
man,
it looks like we're going to be that way for a couple of weeks.
I'm telling you, busy. Basketball, and of course cancellations and postponements always kind of throw a monkey wrench in the gears, so to speak. But I think I feel for coaches and athletic directors and everybody trying to figure all this stuff out.
Well, and even the fans trying to figure it
out. Yeah,
and got all kinds of notes from people, to ask, exactly when are we playing. And as far as I know, the schedule is as we said last week for tonight's games. You have Caldwell County's girls playing at Dawson Springs. I'm almost positive that's varsity first at 6 o'clock,
yes,
followed by the JV game. Caldwell County's boys will be at Hopkins County Central tonight for a makeup date. That will be varsity only, but it will be at 7:30, probably 7:45-ish,
right? Because
there's a Hopkins Central girls game at 6 o'clock against Webster County. So Hopkins Central has a split doubleheader. Caldwell County's boys will play the late game over there. So as we mentioned last week, if you're a real true Caldwell County fan, there's a chance to do both varsity games tonight.
That's right.
If you want to get out there and make the journey from Dawson over to Morton's Gap to see the boys' game after the girls get finished.
Yeah, and then of course big doubleheader Friday night back here at home at the Cab against Trigg County, and I believe they're going to get to do the homecoming festivities from what WPKY understands Friday night.
Well, that's the last remaining home dates until the district tournament,
right?
Unless something has been rescheduled yet that we don't know about. But I have a difficult time seeing them trying to reschedule anything because both teams are already playing tonight and tomorrow. If you tried to play something Saturday, you're looking at 3 straight days.
Seeds of the district tournament already set.
And then next week, you're looking at games just about every day. So both teams are pretty packed for the last.
Yeah.
I don't want to say they couldn't reschedule anything, but I would have a difficult time, expecting them to, I guess.
Exactly. But very, 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 very busy.
And next week, everything's on the road.
Right.
The girls will go to Ohio County Monday night. The boys will go to Union County Tuesday. Now, that's a change from the schedule. Originally, that was supposed to be a Caldwell County home game.
Right.
And, again, we're all happy about getting to make the trip to Union County instead of driving out to the Cab. But because the game at Union got snowed out earlier this season, it was kind of Caldwell's turn to go to Union County the way the schedule worked. So Caldwell's home game now becomes a Union County home game. And then we've got doubleheaders next week to finish. Thursday, both teams will play at Todd County Central, and then Friday at Livingston Central. And then after that, the next week, it's district tournament
time. Yep.
And that's here.
That is
so
here.
We do get some home games for the district.
Yeah, and that's a good thing. And, boy, it's going to be a very hectic push as we head toward postseason.
Well, a lot of times you'll see teams kind of leave the end of the year open just so that you can have some flexibility there with maybe trying to reschedule a game or two. But, putting together schedules, that's really difficult because you have to match things up with other people, and other schools try to, work another team in or work in a tournament, and if you get a week off, that really fouls everything up. And as we mentioned last week when you're talking Title IX implications, the girls had to play as many prime time dates as the boys
do,
which are, those are Friday and Saturday games, so you have to match all those things up. So it's almost a nightmare when you're out there trying to schedule 25 basketball games.
Yeah, I can just imagine. It would not be fun. It's hard enough just trying to get everything covered and trying to figure it out, especially when you have this weather and different things that cause the postponements. So,
And we do have a little kind of breaking news of sorts as that, I tweeted, I guess earlier this week that it looked like Caldwell County was headed to the Kentucky 2A championships next year,
right?
Because it looked like the enrollment was going to be above the All-A Classic, and so I guess it's a good thing that the 2A championships are starting next year, so there's some place for Caldwell County to go. The enrollment numbers do make it appear that Caldwell County will not be in the All-A Classic. However, there's still a chance they might get in under the wire. From everything I've seen, Caldwell County is, I think, 121 on the enrollment list, and the All-A Classic takes 120 and below. And that's something we need to get into to try to explain some of that, because it really gets confusing, and I think sometimes I just assume everybody keeps up with that. And
right. Well, let's talk a little bit about that more. I know you've probably had a few tweets or texts about it, and if you have if you want to interact with Todd or myself, don't forget you can text us at 270-963-9038 while we're doing the show here. So go ahead.
But again, going back to the schedule thing, a lot of Caldwell County's teams are actually in limbo right now as to what to do next season, because as I mentioned, Caldwell County is at 121, which by itself puts them out of the All-A Classic. However, if a couple of schools decide not to play in the All-A Classic, Caldwell County could still slip in under the wire and be eligible again. And as we've mentioned before, Caldwell County has always been right there on that line. You know, either they make it by one or two schools, or a couple of years ago they didn't make it and we sat out of the All-A Classic. And years ago when it started, it was probably 15 years into the All-A Classic, 10 or 15 anyway, before Caldwell County became eligible in the second region, because back then you had a whole lot more smaller schools.
Right.
Even in the second region you had South Hopkins, West Hopkins, Providence, those kind of schools.
Right.
Before
consolidation.
Right. Trigg County wasn't as big as it is now. Fort Campbell, I think, was a little bit smaller enrollment-wise at the time. Just across the state, there were more small schools, and as you mentioned, consolidation's kind of gotten rid of some of those, which is why Caldwell County has been in the All-A Classic. Originally, when the All-A Classic came about in around 1990, it was called the Class A, or the All-A Classic, because it was more in line with the football enrollment at the time. There were 4 football classes then, and so I can't remember the exact numbers. I want to say 425 and below the enrollment, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Can't remember exactly, but so that's kind of what became the All-A Classic. As they lost schools because of consolidation, you know, and the smaller schools closing, well, the All-A Classic people looked and they only had, 60 or 70 schools eligible. Well, they wanted a bigger tournament than that. So instead of going by a strict enrollment number, they decided, well, we'll just take the bottom 120, whatever the enrollment is.
Okay.
And with no regard whatsoever to what class somebody might be in.
Gotcha.
In another sport or, another organization or whatever. And so that's why Caldwell County became eligible, is because they opened it up a little bit to bigger schools, just so there would be enough schools to have, 16 regions and play it like a big state tournament.
Right.
But one other thing we need to mention is that when you talk about the All-A Classic and the new Kentucky 2A Championship, which is starting next year, those are not affiliated with the Kentucky High School Athletic Association. The KHSAA does not run those. They don't sanction them in any way. As far as the KHSAA is concerned, the All-A Classic and the Kentucky 2A Championship might as well be the Paducah-Tillman Christmas Tournament. Now, It's still a big deal. It's still it's kind of like the Louisville Invitation Tournament, which is a big deal, up in that area.
Yeah.
It's still a tremendous honor to go win one of those things. And if you can win something as one of the, you've beaten another 119 schools, it's a really big deal. But, it's not any kind of, the KHSAA doesn't have any kind of, any game you play in the All-A Classic counts against your limitation of season. So every time you win something in the All-A Classic and advance, you have to almost kick games off of your schedule someplace to stay under the limit of games that you're allowed to play.
Gotcha.
And I can't remember this year. It's around 25, somewhere around there, that schools can play. It might be a little bit more than that now, but there's a hard number of games that you can play during a season. And if you play too many, well, then you can get in trouble and be fined. Or several years back, Trigg County had to miss the 5th district tournament because it played too many games during the regular season. So there are penalties for that. So all those things come into play, which again goes back to the whole scheduling nightmare that schools face in a lot of sports.
Wow.
I hope some of that made sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to follow, but when I first started kind of following All-A and all that, it's a big old tournament. It's basically what it is.
And it's great for the small schools to have that tournament, because the Kentucky High School Athletic Association is not going to go to classes in basketball anytime soon, it appears.
Right.
So schools have kind of taken it, into their own hands to have classes. The All-A Classic started in northern Kentucky.
Okay.
And kind of, I think they had that tournament there kind of as an invitational for years before they went statewide and made it a big state tournament. The Kentucky 2A Championship was actually started here in the second region. Jeremy Tackett of Union County and Matt Bell over at Webster County kind of got that ball rolling, and that's where that came out. And the 2A Championship for basketball is open to schools under 1,000 enrollment, but don't qualify for the All-A Classic.
Right.
So I think there's about 65 teams, somewhere thereabout, 60 to 70 teams.
That's a statewide as well.
That are eligible for that. And actually, the Kentucky 2A Championship has a Twitter account, and on that last week, they actually listed the teams that were eligible in each section. They've taken the state into 4 sections, and then, there's 4 regions in each section. And Caldwell County was actually on their list as having accepted the opportunity to play next year. So
and that's the first year.
Right.
Yeah.
And just basketball.
Just basketball.
Where the All-A Classic started with basketball and then expanded to include baseball, softball, soccer, as many sports as possible.
Yeah.
I think the 2A Championship would like to do that, but you have to get sponsorships, you have to make money, you have to raise those funds to be able to do that. And that was another great thing the All-A Classic started, was offering those scholarships. It's not just an opportunity to compete, but they're actually helping kids out too.
Yes.
And 2A Championship would like to do that as well, and that's a huge undertaking. I'm glad somebody's doing that, and it does open an avenue for Caldwell County if CCHS does not make the All-A Classic next year. But again, we're kind of in limbo as we wait to determine, will somebody drop out of the All-A Classic and open a space for Caldwell County, or will Caldwell County be that unlucky last team to not make the All-A Classic?
Well, do you choose to play the All-A over the 2A if you get in?
If you are eligible for the All-A Classic, I think you have to play. I think that was something the 2A people came out in their first thing and said. So you have to play the All-A. Yeah. Okay. If you can't choose to avoid the All-A Classic and then play in the 2A Classic because they don't want to compete with the All-A Classic.
Exactly.
Actually, the state tournaments are going to be different weeks, and I think however they do their sectional tournaments will probably be different weeks than from the All-A Classic regional. So, again, that's going to be fun for people trying to work out those schedules.
Right. Do we get to a point where it gets kind of chaotic and confusing?
I kind of think we're there.
I mean, it's great. I mean, it's wonderful what they're trying to do and to include everybody.
It is. It's a great idea.
Yeah.
I mean,
but it can get a little funky, I guess.
And there's a couple of easy fixes, and I guess easy is in the eye of the beholder. But if the KHSAA would simply go to classes, it would solve a lot of this problem. It would solve your scheduling nightmare, because then you would have, whether you go to 3 classes or 4 classes or whatever, all of those tournaments would be end of the year things, and so you don't have these things where you have a regional tournament in January and then a state tournament first week of February or whatever, and you're trying to work that in, and then when you get through that, get ready for the year-end, tournaments, which is kind of confusing. Or at the very least, and again, I don't think the KHSAA under the current leadership is ever going to go to classes in basketball, but what they could do to at least throw small schools a bone is to say, okay, if you want to play in the All-A Classic or the Kentucky 2A Championship, we're going to exempt some of those games for you. Just have schools counted as 1 game or 2 games or 3 games or whatever, so that you have that hard number on your schedule when you start trying to make out a schedule, and you don't plan, to play 2 games in the All-A Classic, and then you have some success and play 5.
Right.
Well, now you've got to find 3 games on your schedule and call up somebody and say, hey, sorry, we can't play that game now because we're going to be over the limit.
Yeah.
So the All-A Classic doesn't just affect the schedules of the small schools, it affects the schedules of anybody that might play them later on.
That's right.
Who might lose a game,
yeah,
because they can't play them. confused.
Yeah, very interesting. If you got an opinion or a thought on that, text us 270-963-9038. We'd like to hear from you if you want to chime in on those tournaments and how that works.
Because one of the big questions I would get is, how can Caldwell County be 3A in football and 1A in basketball? And I'm like, well, it's two different organizations. It's two different, apples and oranges.
Yeah.
The KHSAA, a lot of people look at classes and think of football because that's the big thing. And there are 6 classes in football. So those things are broken down quite a bit. There's less than 40 teams in each class for football across the state because of the 6 classes. So they're not going to match up. And here's the thing, there are other classes, cross country and track. They have 3 classes, so that makes up a different thing. I'm kind of the opinion that the fair thing to do is have classes in all sports.
Across the board.
48 states do that. The 2 that don't are Delaware and Kentucky, and Delaware has significantly fewer high schools than Kentucky does. So, I think there's, I want to say like 270 some odd schools maybe that play basketball across Kentucky. So,
wow.
It looks to me like it'd be pretty simple to carve those up into about 3 classes. Again, simple being, the key word there.
Yeah, that's the key
word.
Word
what looks simple to one person might not be simple in practice. And, football runs into the problem because they've got so many classes and you're trying to cut them down into districts. Well, you end up, the geography doesn't always work, and you can have schools that are 2 hours apart being district, and
right.
You don't want that kind
you
of
don't
travel.
Want that. No.
You would hope, I think, when you're putting together a football schedule that you can put together a regular season slate and not really have any games more than about an hour away. I would think just from a cost perspective and, fans traveling to the game. Sure, it's fun to have that one game every now and then where you get to travel. We all love that trip to Greene County where we made the swing through Campbellsville to go to Druthers.
Go to Druthers, sure.
I mean, that was awesome. And the Tigers got a big win up at Greene County that night. But the reality is those things are difficult, and it takes a lot of money. And with the transportation costs being what they are, you don't want to be in a situation where you look at your district and your nearest district opponent is an hour and a half or 2 hours away, and every time you take a district trip, it's a long trip. So that's where geography and math and all those things come into play, and you're trying to figure it all out, and, man, it really does get confusing. I think there are probably too many classes in football. What we need to do is have another class less or 2 in football and, go to classes and everything else.
You think you ever see it?
Never say never, but I don't think it's coming anytime
soon.
But a few years back, baseball and softball coaches actually voted to go to classes. But, the KHSAA said, no,
we're not doing it.
It was kind of like when the schools voted to separate private and public, and the KHSAA said, no. I mean, what do you do?
That's right. Oh, well, I think you at least we made a little progress in trying to explain all this. I know
clear
it
as
can be
mud.
confusing. Yeah, it's clear as mud. But no, you did a good job trying to sort through it all, and it's just stay tuned and see what happens, because it's a work in progress, obviously, as far as where we're going to fall and where we're going to go.
So again, right now we're just kind of in limbo, and a lot of coaches have already put their schedules together for next season, or at least very close to getting them finished, and they're waiting on this because, again, you look at the All-A Regional, and you're going to play a couple of games there. Caldwell County, look at volleyball. Caldwell County's girls typically win the region. Well, they've won the region in volleyball every year they've been eligible for the All-A Classic and gone to state, which is fantastic. But, it's a couple of games in the region. If you go to state, they have pool play. You're going to play 4, 5, 6 games up there. You have to, if you're Caldwell County and you're putting together a schedule, you have to, look ahead and account for those things. And you can't schedule a whole bunch of games and be over at the end because, again, that can get you in trouble. So I do wish the KHSAA would just step in and make some kind of, exemption for schools that play in an All-A Classic or a 2A championship. And if it's just, hey, if you're playing that, it counts as 2 games on your schedule. If you play more, congratulations. And if you don't play but 1, well.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, probably.
You've got to have some kind of fix because everybody's schedule just goes crazy by trying to move games and reschedule games, and nothing is worse. And I've seen this in baseball. You have bad weather and you can't get games in, and then you finally get some games in, and then you look at that last 2 weeks of the season. The weather's beautiful and you got games scheduled. One team cancels because they can't play because they've got too many games. Another team cancels because they have a district game that has to be made up. And the next thing you know, you're sitting there for a week without a game. The weather's beautiful. Everybody wants to get to the ballpark.
And you'll be playing baseball.
And you can't play because of the schedule limitations. And that's, to me, sports is all about playing the games. And if we're going to limit all that, we need to limit it in a way that at least makes some sense. And sometimes the schedules get out of control. And, again, it's, as a sports guy, it's heartbreaking to go out and the weather's 65 degrees, the sun's shining. You had a game scheduled today, but you can't play because
that's
the other
horrible.
team had too many games scheduled.
Horrible.
And we've seen that, quite often.
Yeah, we have. And here's the good thing: we're about a month away from our first game, a little over.
Is it
March
next
15th?
Week? Pitchers and catchers report in Major League Baseball.
Oh man, yeah. I mean, we're getting. I'm smelling spring.
It's a great time of the year for sports because you have the Super Bowl. Looking ahead to our list, you have the spring training starting. Basketball season is winding down. It's playoff time for basketball, so it's really a good time of the year if you're a sports fan.
March Madness.
It's starting to warm up a little bit, maybe, hint to the weather people, warm up so we can get out and play some golf. And
there you go. Yeah, you do that.
So hopefully we get all those things, and, again, just fun time to be the sports people.
Let's take a break. We're going to recollect. It's 9. We're about halfway through our show, and we've got all kinds of things to cover. Thank you for sorting through some of that stuff.
I hope it makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it does, but it's very, like I said, we're just kind of in limbo. So
right.
We're going to come back here in just a second. We're going to take a quick break here on the Sideline Report. We'll come back and talk some more good stuff. You're listening to the Sideline Report from the Times Leader on your hometown radio station, WPKY The Tiger. Here's a reminder from your Princeton Electric Plant Board. Meter tampering is dangerous. Tampering with an electric meter is not only dangerous, it is dishonest and against the law. Stealing electricity by tampering with an electric meter may result in your arrest and can even risk your life. Tampering with meters results in increased utility bills that everyone has to pay. If you see anyone tampering with an electric meter, call the Princeton Electric Plant Board right away at 270-365-2031. Princeton Electric Plant Board, Princeton's #1 energy source.
New car buyers, listen up. We need to move our new car and truck inventory fast, and we need your trade. At Tri-Seas Incorporated, we know the dollar is tight, but there's never been a better time to buy a new vehicle. With fantastic rebates, low rates, awesome trade allowance, and 7 American car lines to choose from, Tri-Seas Incorporated is sure to fit you with the perfect vehicle at a price that's pleasing. And as always, if we don't have what you want on our lot, we'll find it for you. Don't go out of town for a good deal. Stay in town for a great deal. Tri-Seas Incorporated, where your trade is worth more.
And at 9:28, we are back on the Sideline Report. Sports editor Todd Griffin of the Times Leader in studio, and we sorted through all that, and lots more to talk about. Yeah, lots more to talk about.
It's a lot of numbers to throw at people, and again, if you don't keep up with it regularly, it's really confusing, and hopefully I help straighten that out a little bit. It's just when you start talking class this or class that, it's not always equal. I mean,
it's not.
So hopefully that explains why Caldwell County was 3A in football and still playing in the All-A Classic.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think you did a good job with it.
Well, and a good call for you on the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I guess it was a good call. I did have a feeling the Eagles were going to win, but I really just didn't want the Patriots to win. So
I think a lot of the country was in the same boat.
And, what a great game, though, really.
It was one of the best Super Bowls
in a good while.
Yeah, we've ever seen. And the funny thing is, for years, the Super Bowl was always just a horrible game. You get all fired up, and you'd sit down, and the Super Bowl was over by halftime. I mean, what was it, one year? The Cowboys won a game 52-3 or 55-3 or something like that.
It was 52-17.
Oh, that's what it was. I knew there was a really lopsided game in there someplace.
That was back in '93.
And you don't really want that. I think if you're the NFL, you want a competitive, close Super Bowl, and we've seen that for the last few years. I mean,
that was a good offensive Super Bowl. You think the Eagles had this touted defense, but yet you're playing against Tom Brady and the Patriots, and it turned out to be more of an offensive affair.
It was, and it was fun to watch. But when you talk about the defense, the Eagles' defense did make the play of the game, I thought, by stripping the ball from Tom Brady on that last drive,
no doubt about
next to last drive, I guess. And to me, that was the play of the game.
Brady tried to sell it as the throw.
Oh, yeah.
Did you see it?
I thought everybody in New England would yell "tuck rule," tuck rule, but not this time.
No, because it was obvious he fumbled it.
Well, and I think he knew it. You saw him sitting on the field afterward. He knew, and
he did.
Again, that's the kind of thing you have to do, though. I knew if anybody was going to beat New England, they number one had to be more physical.
They had to get to Brady.
Yeah, even if you get a few penalties here or there, you have to be more physical. And you have to get to Brady, and at some point, you have to make a play defensively. And they did, because I was expecting New England to run down the field and score.
I think many people had it in their mind. Here it comes.
I really thought that, they'll score. Hopefully, if you're a Philadelphia fan, they do it quickly so that you've got time to come back and maybe kick a field goal and win the game or get the game to overtime or however it was going to play out. But it worked out just great. And then you just – Philadelphia just needed to run the football and get as much time off the clock as they could, and they did. Kick the field goal to go up 8, and I thought New England panicked a little bit with the reverse on the kickoff. It was kind of a short kick. I'm thinking just head up the field,
just
get
all
you
field.
can get,
yeah.
And you've got Tom Brady, and they still had 50 seconds, I think, something like that to go. So I think maybe they panicked just a little bit at the end, which is surprising as many times as they've been in the Super Bowl and been there.
Yeah, and I found it kind of ironic about the couple of touchdowns that the Eagles had. Of course, Chris Collingsworth and the NBC crew kept going back. Is this a touchdown? He was. Is he really did? But those rules are a little sketchy.
They are,
and it's
sometimes
really,
I think deliberately sketchy.
And I kept thinking, oh my goodness, if we have one of those called back. In my mind, they were both touchdowns. I'm no NFL referee. I know they review this stuff in New York but
to me, the first one was the one that was most iffy, and the only reason is because most of the season, when you've seen that play, they've ruled it an incompletion.
Yeah.
So it's almost like they said, well, we're going to change the rules because it's a big game.
Yeah.
And if you're I think it was probably a touchdown. It's so tough. If you're the official on the field and you're trying to call the play, you can't see a little wobble of the ball as somebody is going full speed and trying to pull it in, and you're looking to see if their feet are in bounds. And, we've taken this instant replay way too far in some instances.
I think so.
And then limited it in other ways that, we could open it up and use it. But to me, the second touchdown was clearly a touchdown. They talk about, well, you've got to maintain the catch. I'm like, that's if you're going to the ground to make the catch. The guy was standing up, caught the ball, took 3 steps, got hit by a defensive player. That's why he was going to the ground, not because he was making an attempt to catch the ball.
Right.
He had already caught the ball and become a runner. And to me, once you do that and you break the plane, the play's over and it's a touchdown. So I had no idea. I expected them to show a picture of the booth, and we'd see Chris Collinsworth with a big New England foam finger.
Yeah. I'm normally, we hear bias in sports, but I really thought I don't know. It just seemed like, in my mind, he was really.
Yeah, he seemed awfully disappointed
he
that
did, and
New England lost. And
I like Collinsworth.
Oh yeah,
I think they're a great team. But it just I don't know, but I was happy with the outcome, as I think a lot of people were. And there's a text. Let's see here. See what somebody is saying. No, it's just that's a birthday. So,
well, happy
thank
birthday.
You. Yeah. Not too late, Melissa. Thanks for texting. We will shout out to your niece Allie Kreider. It's her 6th birthday today.
Wow.
So happy birthday. So, but good Super Bowl and very entertaining if you're a football fan. I know a lot of folks. This has been kind of a controversial year for the NFL. I didn't watch any football, that kind of stuff, and I didn't watch much football during the regular season. But the Super Bowl is a big event. It's kind of larger than life in a way. It's a fun event, and football still is a great sport. And
a lot of storylines going on with this game too.
A lot of storylines.
You wondered if Belichick was going to stick around. That was a big thing. You wondered if it was Tom Brady's last game. That was a big thing. Philadelphia had never won a Super Bowl championship. You wondered if maybe they could get there first.
Nick Foles.
You had the backup quarterback playing, and what do they do with him now?
Yeah,
when Carson Wentz comes back.
Yeah, that was my biggest thing. That's tough. I mean, this guy, stepped in there. Of course, he had started before and was a very adequate to above average quarterback, and had streaks of brilliance. But that performance there and some of the playoff.
Well, I think quarterback success sometimes is tied to, who the head coach is, who the offensive coordinator is.
No doubt.
I think if you go back and look at the Pittsburgh Steelers this year, there was a disconnect between Ben Roethlisberger and Todd Haley, the offensive coordinator, and I think that's why, they struggled some and got beat. Although the offense did pretty well in the game, they got beat in the playoffs. Right. It was the defense that couldn't make a stop, but still, I think when you have those problems, it ends up being a problem in the locker room, and I think that it kind of destroys any cohesion the team has, and it keeps you from building any momentum going into the postseason. You want everybody on the same page, and when you don't have everybody on the same page, it's really tough to expect to have a lot of success.
Yeah, it is. But what about the gutsy call there, the touchdown to Foles?
Oh, that was a great play. And then he said, Foles said later that was an old high school play he ran.
Okay.
And I can't remember who threw the pass, but I think he was a former
quarterback in high school.
And it was a nice pass.
It was a nice pass.
Foles made a good catch.
And he was out there all by himself.
Yeah, nobody went with him.
They didn't have a clue that was going to happen. So, what a great gutsy play call. And I think now Collingsworth did, you got to give him kudos here. He kept talking about Peterson, and is that right, head coach? Is that his name?
Yeah.
His gutsy play calling, and it was. It was. He left nothing on the table as far as calling plays. And
oh yeah.
So.
Well, I think you have to pull out the stops a little bit, especially if you're the perceived underdog,
exactly.
Which I think the Eagles probably were.
Yep.
I think anybody against New England at that point was going to be an underdog regardless,
Mm-hmm.
but. Yeah, I don't think you can play it safe. Even late in the game when they went for it on the 4th and 1,
yes,
when the safe play is probably to punt, to me that was a brilliant call. I didn't like throwing the ball on 3rd and 1 and 4th and 1.
Right.
If you're going to go for it, run the ball on third down and
yeah.
try to get it. But, that aside, I think going for it on 4th down was, a tremendous call because if you get it, your drive's alive. If you don't get it, New England's got a short field, and you're thinking, well, they're probably going to score anyway, so you'd rather have them score quickly so you can get the ball back.
More time, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I agree with that. So, great game, and it was fun, and Philadelphia is still standing for the most part.
Yeah, most of it.
I know. You figured there would be, a pretty big celebration as there was, but most of all pretty tame.
So anyway, we've made everyone wait long enough for our list, and I believe you're up first.
I'm up first. You got to go back to January 15th, 1978, and this is Super Bowl 12. Dallas Cowboys over the Denver Broncos. I was a big Dallas fan back then. Tom Landry. That's really the first. I was always in the room as a little kid watching Super Bowls. This was the first one I was really into. And that was that was big for me to see those guys. Roger Staubach, Too Tall Jones, Robert Newhouse, and just all those great Dallas players.
Back then, if the Cowboys or the Steelers weren't in the Super Bowl, and a lot of times playing each other,
that's exactly
you wondered
right.
what was going on.
That's exactly right. So, but anyway, in Dallas, Dallas didn't have as much luck with the Pittsburgh Steelers, but they did against the Broncos that year.
Craig Morton was quarterback of the Broncos.
He sure was.
I don't know why I remember that, but
I remember that.
That's one of those things that's in my brain for always.
I think he was number 10.
Super Bowl 12.
Yep, Super Bowl 12.
Okay, my number 5 is Super Bowl 14 from 1980. Steelers 31, Rams 19.
Wow.
I can't remember which one of the Steelers.
That was Vince Ferragamo.
Yes, it was Vince Ferragamo. I was going to ask if you could remember which journeyman quarterback got the Rams to the Super Bowl, and I think the Rams at that point thought they would be in the Super Bowl, quite a bit. I think we talked several months back about the Dolphins and Dan Marino when they got to the Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. And Marino thought that, I think that was his first or second year. I think his first year, actually.
His first year.
And he thought, well, this is going to be like an every year thing that we'll be in the Super Bowl. And
you're kind of impressed with the Vince Ferragamo,
yes, I am.
That I pulled that out. You didn't think I had it in me, did you? Anyway, that's a great Super Bowl.
But Marino thought they'd be there every year. Yeah. And he never got back.
No, he never got back.
And such an incredible quarterback, and was always on good teams, but just couldn't get there.
Coming up short, yeah.
And then you look, and the Steelers and Cowboys are there just about every year. So Steelers and Rams, Super Bowl 14. That's my number 5.
I tell you what, that's a good one, Todd. And I mean, that was could have potentially have made my list as well because that's prime time that I was into the NFL. But the number 4 on my list, I got to go back to January 31st of '88, 10 years later, and my man Doug Williams, Grambling great and Buccaneer quarterback, led the Washington Redskins over the Denver Broncos that year.
Oh, wow.
42-10. He passed for like 340 yards, had 4 touchdowns. He went off in the second quarter and was MVP, I think, of the Super Bowl. And I always liked Doug Williams. And, man, he just had a heck of a game. And I think I can't remember if he started the whole season for the Redskins or had to come in and was backup. I can't really remember.
I can't remember.
But he was always usually a starting quarterback. Yeah. But I think there was a couple teams that as he journeyed through the NFL. But anyway, that was a fantastic. I think he almost had to come in later on in the season, and then of course he just had a brilliant performance. I was so glad for him.
I think I know what one of your top 3 is going to be.
Oh yeah.
Wait.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're at number 4. My number 4 is Super Bowl 10 from 1976. Steelers 21, Cowboys 17. That was the Lynn Swann game.
Oh, yeah.
MVP with 161 yards receiving on 4 catches.
Yeah.
He made 4 catches, was MVP, 1 touchdown, 161 yards, and that was at the Orange Bowl back. It was the last game in the Orange Bowl. Crazy, fact.
Yeah.
While it still had artificial turf, at least as far as the old artificial turf. I think they probably had some of the newer stuff in before it closed, but the old hard turf, and you see Swann just making these
incredible. Of course, he took ballet, and of course he took a little flack about that, kind of like Rosie Greer took flack for crocheting, I think. But that game, those ballet skills came in handy. There's no doubt about it.
And it was so strange that he even played in that game because I think it was the AFC Championship game against maybe the Raiders. He went across the middle and just absolutely got creamed. I mean, it'd be one of those not just targeting calls today, but you'd be getting a stiff fine from the league office. Mm-hmm. Well, back then, if you were a receiver and you went across the middle, hey, you're on your own.
Oh yeah.
Well, there was a lot of doubt as to whether Swann could play in the Super Bowl. Well, not only played, he obviously had a big game, made those big plays, and when you get 161 yards on 4 catches, those probably aren't screen passes.
No, probably not.
All those are leaping catches down the field. And
Well, what a performance that was.
I think one of those plays, Terry Bradshaw actually said he was throwing the ball out of bounds because Swann was covered, and Swann went up somehow, grabbed it, got his feet in, and still made the catch.
Yeah. I mean, so many great you go back and watch NFL films, and you see a lot of Lynn Swann's catches, and it was a Swann.
They're all acrobatic. I mean,
yeah, they are. He made a lot of them,
but I think you had to be in some ways back then if you were a receiver and you're running around across the middle because you had to get out of the way of guys coming at you because there weren't the protections. If you go back and watch some of those highlights, Bradshaw and Staubach, those guys when they're throwing passes, they're getting killed. Guys are taking 2 steps and just leveling them after the pass.
And that's when the linemen and stuff, the linebackers and stuff, wore those dang pads on their forearms. And, I mean, they were just coming through, just crashing through the line.
Of course, that's also why they threw the ball 18 to 20 times a game as opposed to 40 to 45 today because the quarterback didn't have any protection, really.
No.
So
it was a different game.
You had to get rid of it and try to protect yourself if you could.
Oh, yeah. Well, let's go to number 3, and this is January 26, 1986. And this team had a lot of charisma to it. They knew weeks before, they even recorded an album, a record called the Super Bowl Shuffle. But you got to love Mike Ditka, Hall of Fame player and coach. They tore into the New England Patriots. That was before the Belichick days, but 46-10. And that was Super Bowl 20 in 1986. The Chicago Bears, Jim McMahon at quarterback. You had Walter Payton. Of course, you had Sweetness.
The refrigerator.
Yes. You had the fridge. You had Richard Dent on defense. I mean, and Samurai Mike. I mean, it was a great team.
Actually, I think there was just a little bit of controversy in that Bears camp because Payton didn't get the ball at the goal line. They gave it to the refrigerator.
Yeah, and I think Mike Ditka regrets that to this day. I've heard interviews
Sweetness
with him.
never got his Super Bowl touchdown.
Sweetness never got his Super Bowl touchdown. I think Mike Ditka. But, if you're there to win, probably. Does Peyton get a touchdown running it in? Probably, but you just don't know.
And the quarterback for New England that day, Steve Grogan.
That's exactly right, Steve Grogan, and that's when they had Patriot Pete still on their helmets, I do believe.
Yes, and they wore the it was kind of a reddish jersey instead of the blue.
Who's the MVP of that Super Bowl was? That was Super Bowl 20, correct? Yeah, that was.
Was it somebody on the defense?
It was Richard Dent. He had 2 sacks and 2 forced fumbles.
I thought it was because that was just
they had a great defense too, and I mean it just
and that game was close for maybe about 5 minutes.
Yeah, and I mean they just knew. I mean I think it was like 2 or 3 weeks out they recorded that Super Bowl shuffle. I mean there was no doubt they were going to win it. Yeah. So anyway, fun team, fun year.
Okay, my number 3 is just going back 9 years for this one. It's the Ice Storm Super Bowl.
09.
That was Super Bowl 43.
Was that actually in 10? It was 09, wasn't it?
It was 09,
yeah. It was 09, yeah.
Steelers 27, Cardinals 23. And I was really torn that game because, I grew up a Steelers fan, still pull for the Steelers, still pull for the Rams, even though they went back to Los Angeles on me. But quarterback for the Cardinals, was Kurt Warner.
Yes.
And that's why I said for years he deserved to be in the Hall of Fame, and thank goodness he's in there now.
Yes.
Because if you can take the Rams to 2 Super Bowls and the Cardinals to a Super Bowl, you should have your own wing in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah. I mean, fantastic quarterback, and that's one of those guys that, was kind of lost in a different league for a while. He was in the Arena League or something one day.
With the Iowa Barnstormers.
Yeah, and then hit the NFL and became just a super. I mean, it was a great quarterback.
And that was a great game. It was 27-23.
That was a great game.
Threw the touchdown pass into the corner of the end zone late, and the Steelers won it 27-23. And I felt great that the Steelers won it, but I felt bad that.
Where did you watch it? Did you have power at your house?
No, I went to my brother's house in Franklin, Kentucky, and watched it there.
Yeah,
and it was weird because there was ice on everything here, and it was warm enough that day down there that we were walking around with short-sleeve shirts on, so it was kind of weird.
It was weird. I remember one of my neighbors had a generator hooked up, my son and I walked up to kind of catch part of that game and have a bowl of chili. They had that, so I didn't have power or anything at my house, but that was a great Super Bowl, and so under some weird circumstances for everybody. Yeah. Some people around here got to see it. A lot of people didn't. I mean, there was a lot more important things to think about than a Super Bowl, but some people, just went on about the routine, which is great.
And I say the Ice Storm Super Bowl for us, not for everybody. Nobody else would.
Right.
We know what we're talking about.
Exactly, but it was a great game. Okay, number 2 on my list. Man, this goes back to January 25th of 1981. I'm in middle school. All season long, I've always kind of liked the Oakland Raiders, but I just thought Jim Plunkett was really cool. So I followed the Raiders all that season, and I don't know really why, but they were great. So they made it to the Super Bowl and played the Philadelphia Eagles, Ron Jaworski, and that was one of those Dick Vermeil Eagle team. But Plunkett came through. Of course, he had won the Heisman Trophy in college and just had a great Super Bowl. And they won 27-10 back in 1981 on Super Bowl 15.
And I believe that's the first time a wild card team won the Super Bowl. I think the Raiders made it as a wild card.
They certainly did, and you're probably right about that. I'm trying to see who the MVP. I think Plunkett might have got the MVP.
I was thinking he did.
I think he did, but I want to go back and check. That was Super Bowl 15. That's an XV, correct? Yeah, and that is, Jim Plunkett. He had 261 yards passing and 3 touchdowns.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's your number 2.
That's my number 2.
So we're up to number 2, okay. My number 2 is going to be Super Bowl 13, and you can probably sense a theme in some of my Super Bowls.
Yeah, but I think it's cool. I think it's great. Stick by your team.
Steelers 35, Cowboys 31.
I will admit
to this day,
that was a tough one.
I feel bad for Jackie Smith to this day.
Jackie Smith, they caught it in the end zone, had a pass right in his hands, and he just kind of stiffened up.
I don't know if the Cowboys would for sure have won the game, but it's a catch that,
No, I remember it. I mean, he just
an NFL guy should make, and it just hit him in the chest and fell.
He seized in the end zone. It's like he just kind of stretched out.
Now, he had to go down a little bit to get it. It wasn't like, pitch and catch, but still you expect that ball to be caught in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, that's, yeah. But what a great game. I mean, 4-point game, and it could have gone either way there. Man, those are some great Steelers and Cowboys teams.
Again, you go back
years.
and you see Steelers and Cowboys, and what would a Steelers and Cowboys Super Bowl next year be? I mean, you want to talk about reversing trends of viewership going down.
Right.
I think you put Steelers and Cowboys back in the Super Bowl. I think your viewership would be through the roof.
Oh, there's no doubt about it, because back during our era, especially when we were growing up, that's who you expected to see through the 70s, and then as it got into the 80s and the San Francisco 49ers came on. And I really can't believe I don't have any of those, because I liked those teams.
Oh, yeah.
The Joe Montana teams and Jerry Rice, and of course, I was a Dallas fan still then, but I remember the catch just stands out in my mind.
Oh,
in that NFC Championship game that Dwight Clark caught, because I really think Montana was throwing that out into the end zone. He just leaped up there and caught it.
At the very least, he was just throwing it to the back of the end zone and trying to keep it out of Dallas's hands.
And I mean, he had Too Tall Jones and the whole defensive line in his face backing him up toward the sideline, and he just, man, that was unbelievable.
But look at the fortunes that changed on that one play. The Cowboys kind of went down after that.
That was it, yeah.
But that was the play that kind of spurred the 49ers on to whatever it was, 5 championships.
Yeah. And so, and that all started right after. That was 82, really. That started after that Philadelphia and Oakland Super Bowl, because San Francisco went on that next year and defeated Cincinnati in the Super Bowl. So
wow,
yeah. All right, are we up to my number one?
Yes.
Well, I was born in St. Petersburg, Florida, and I followed the Dolphins until we got the Buccaneers in 1976, and we finally went from worst to first in 1979, and I had to wait a really long time. There's like kind of a Raiders-Buccaneers connection, of course, because Tony Dungy had been the coach at Tampa Bay. Great, built an incredible defense. The Tampa 2 and all with Lane Kiffin, Lonnie Kiffin, his dad. Is it right? I get Lane.
I think that's right.
Lonnie Kiffin's his name. But anyway, that Tampa 2 defense, it was tough. John Gruden comes in the next year and wins a Super Bowl with Tampa Bay against his former team that he came from, the Oakland Raiders, and that was Super Bowl 37. January 26th of 2003, but my beloved Bucks finally got their Super Bowl win.
I felt like that would be your number one.
Yeah. So that's it.
So my number one is going to be Super Bowl 34, which I think a lot of people will remember from January 30th, 2000.
Yes.
Rams 23, Titans 16.
What a game that was.
And, that you had the two teams, St. Louis, Nashville. That was the game.
Yeah, and I can't believe it didn't make my list, because that was one of the best Super Bowls, because right there, that lunge there at the end.
A yard short,
and it went down to the wire. But, Kurt Warner leading that team, and Dick Vermeil, the coach.
Yeah, and Warner wasn't the starting quarterback on that team when the season started. It was Trent Green.
It was Trent Green, wasn't it?
Trent Green got hurt in the preseason, and everybody, they had made the deal to bring him over, and he was going to be sort of the savior of the Rams offense, and he goes down, and everybody's like, whoa, because, they brought in Marshall Faulk. They still had the receivers, Isaac Bruce and Torrey Holt. They were all fired up about that, and then, Trent Green has the injury in the preseason that cost him the entire season. I mean, you knew he was gone for the year, and everybody's like, well, who's this Kurt Warner guy? Do we need to go out and get another quarterback? But apparently the locker room believed in him, and
that was 34, right?
Yeah, Kurt Warner had something in him.
414 yards passing, 2 touchdowns. He did,
And just and the one thing I remember about that year is I picked all the games in the paper that year, each playoff game. Somehow I got every game right that year.
Wow! So you're
and so I don't know to this day if I actually knew something that was going on, or if I just kept picking the Rams and the Titans all the way through, and they just kept winning.
They just kept winning.
So,
yeah, that's awesome. But yeah, what a great Super Bowl that was. And boy, there's been some really good ones and memorable ones. It's just a fun day. I mean, to get into it. And again, NFL very controversial right now, but it's still a great game, and maybe they'll get everything that's controversial worked out, but it's fun.
Well, you can't really solve some of the social issues with the players. I mean, I think everybody has a right to try to make their own point, but
where you do it and how you do it.
Right. I mean, to me, the biggest thing as a sports fan, I want to see them fix the rules. I mean, you watch a game and you used to know what was a penalty and what wasn't a penalty, and now it seems like they just kind of make it up, or they write the rules so vaguely.
And just like those catches, you're like,
exactly.
Oh my goodness, what's going to happen? And then if they would have reversed one, is that a taint on the entire game? Is it, does it, and I like that they can go back and review some, but I mean, sometimes, like you said, it's almost gotten where they're overdoing it. And there's a lot, in high school football, I don't know about college anymore, but I mean, the play on the field is the way. Yeah,
I do like the fact that you can correct just
a
horrendous
mistake,
because officials can get blocked out of plays.
I agree.
They can. You don't want a touchdown to come down to a guy landing 2 feet out of bounds, but the two referees in the corner of the end zone were both blocked out, and one of them has to guess, was he in or out? And
I get it.
I like having replay where you can go back and fix those situations. What I don't like is when they show the replay 100 times and show 100 angles, and you really can't tell, and they say, what is it? See on the video in a couple of shots that, hey, the call is wrong and needs to be fixed, fine. But we don't need to split hairs on every play, to see if somebody's toe might have been on the ground, or that's just too much.
Definitely. I found it interesting. I went back when I was doing some of this Super Bowl research. Tulane Stadium in New Orleans was
Pittsburgh won a Super Bowl there, I believe.
Yeah, and I guess that was the Superdome was not there yet, or was it? I mean, but what was the appeal with the Tulane Stadium in New Orleans? Was it?
I'm not really sure why it was played there. I just if you go back to the early days of the Super Bowl, it wasn't quite the draw that it is now.
Right.
As a matter of fact, if you go back to the first one, which wasn't even the Super Bowl yet, but now is, I think tickets were $12 a piece, and they did not sell out the Coliseum in Los Angeles for that game. So the Super Bowl now, at least, what it's become in the last 15, 20 years, it was a different thing back when it first got started in the late 60s, early 70s. It's kind of come a long way.
It has evolved, and of course, they started, I guess, putting these things and you'd have a host city for these, or then I don't know how they decided where they were going to be. At the time, usually it was like, U.S. Bank Stadium this year, and I don't know what's the determining factor as to where they are.
I assume the NFL just awards those.
That's what I was thinking.
The best bid or whatever, but I haven't even looked to see where it is next year.
This doesn't say, but I'm sure it'll be, quite, of course, with modern stadiums and they're going to pick something that's probably just incredibly really nice. I don't think one has been. Yeah, it was in Arlington back in 2011.
So for the longest time, they wouldn't put the Super Bowl in a northern city.
Exactly.
And then after 9/11, they awarded it to New York because of that. And there was a lot of concern that, the weather might be horrible for that, but I think they actually had a pretty good week of weather for that. And, of course, when you go to Minnesota, they have an indoor stadium, but a lot of the events are outside.
Yeah.
So, that's a concern. But they had gotten to the point where they wanted to be in Miami or New Orleans or Pasadena.
The weather's good.
It had kind of got into a rotation where those were the only places it was going. So I do kind of like that we're getting back to, moving it around a little bit. To me, I
do too.
As an old school guy, what's wrong with a little snow for the Super Bowl?
No, I agree. I wouldn't mind seeing, here's the conditions on the field, deal with it, see where it goes.
One of the greatest games in NFL history is the Ice Bowl between the Cowboys and the Packers, and that, I think, was the NFC Championship game.
I think, that was a great game. I always remember the playoff. I think it was a playoff game. You're the one in New England where the guy got this snow sled out and they could kick a field goal and did the kind of made a way so they had to kick a winning field goal. He cleared the snow so they kicked the winning field goal.
I can't remember if that was a playoff game or not. I remember the game.
I don't know. It might not have been a playoff game, but I mean, back in the day, I loved Inside the NFL on HBO. With Lynn Dawson, Nick Bonaconte, and those guys. And I mean, they had all the NFL Films clips, and I still love to this day. I love NFL Films. I think the Sable guys were brilliant, and it's just you can go back and relive all those times, with that, because the NFL did a fantastic job of documenting, the NFL, and I don't know if anybody has done that in another sport the way the NFL has, have they?
No, I think they were the first to kind of take advantage of the video aspect of things and put all that together, and you can only imagine how much video they have on archives because money.
Show me the money.
I mean, that's why it's professional sports,
Yeah.
Nobody was going to start a league if they weren't trying to make money. Well, you make money by putting people in the stands, and I think when TV came along, a lot of people thought, that might take away some of that. There was some concerns in radio.
Yes.
That they didn't want people to broadcast their games because people would listen at home instead of coming to the game.
Yeah.
And at the time, you were making your money by putting people in the seats. And
no doubt.
Not anymore. Anymore, you make your money by humongous TV contracts. So,
exactly.
I think the NFL was probably at the forefront of some of that.
No doubt about it. No doubt. Well, that's been fun, and we're about to have to wrap up. Of course, we've got the wrestling, First Region Wrestling in Union County or Ohio County? Ohio County. That's this weekend.
The regional wrestling tournament, and good luck to the Tigers up at that, is Saturday at Ohio County. And Emma Talley is in action.
Down under.
Yeah, playing in Australia this week. It's actually a ladies' European Tour event that she's playing in Canberra, Australia this weekend. And that's sort of a warm-up for the LPGA Tour event, which is going on, it's
25th,
15th through the 18th.
15th through the 18th. Okay, so I got it's a week late.
That's in Adelaide.
Okay.
And the event this week it's kind of like more like a Symetra Tour event like she played last week. The prize money for that's $150,000, which is kind of on par, pardon the pun, with the Symetra Tour event. But the LPGA event, which is coming up next week, has a total purse of $1.3 million.
There you go.
So there's the big bucks.
Yeah, we wish Emma luck down under, and enjoy those Vegemite sandwiches. And then of course Eli Pepper and his Lipscomb Bisons, they host Jacksonville tonight at Allen Arena. I think they're going to tip that at 6:30 tonight.
And is that on ESPN3?
Yep, they're usually on ESPN3 if you want to follow the Lipscomb Bisons and see a hometown boy playing hoops and all kinds of good stuff. We got a Special Olympians event. Our Special Olympic basketball team going to be in Bowling Green this weekend. They're having their regions over there. So good luck to our Special Olympic basketball team as they travel to Bowling Green.
And basketball action tonight for both Caldwell County teams. Again, if you missed it earlier, the girls are at Dawson Springs. Dawson plays their varsity games first.
Yep.
So it's varsity at 6, JV afterward at Dawson Springs for Caldwell County's girls. Caldwell County's boys will be at Hopkins County Central tonight. That is varsity only at about 7:30. It's the second game of a Hopkins Central doubleheader. The Lady Storm will play Webster County in the opener at 6. So just varsity for the boys tonight.
Right. And you can catch the girls' game here on WPKY, the Tiger. I believe Eric Jacobs and Dennis Stevens going to bring you that game tonight from Dawson Springs. And, of course, tomorrow night at the Cab, we got the big doubleheader against Trigg County.
And homecoming.
And homecoming, yep, from what I understand. So.
And I'm going to try to do the double dip tonight, depending on how long the girls' game goes. But
so follow Todd on Twitter. He'll try to keep you updated on Twitter. And then we'll have the game on the Lady Tiger game here on the Tiger. Be on there shortly before 6, and it's internet willing, which should have good signal up there in Dawson on WPKY online as well.
And we're flying toward the postseason. Next week is the last week of the regular season for high school basketball. District tournament start Monday, February 19th. So, again, an exciting time if you're a Caldwell County basketball fan. The 7th district tournament is actually in Princeton this year. So a good chance to get out and support the local teams.
Yeah, come on out and support the local teams. And, Todd, I just got a notice that the Philadelphia Eagles are starting their parade in downtown Philadelphia.
Oh, wow.
Right now.
Will there be any of the city left when it's done?
I hope so. Surely they have Philadelphia's finest out there protecting the streets. So another great show today. We are about 5 minutes after, but hey, that's okay.
Hey, we filled the hour again.
Well, we filled the hour. Do we have anything else that we need to mention?
I think that's it. Just support your local teams, and it's a busy week. We'll be out there covering everything we can.
Yep. Follow Todd Griffin, of course, at say it again on your Twitter feed.
At Todd Griffin 100.
Yep. And of course, pick up the Times Leader on Wednesdays and Saturdays for the best sports coverage around, no doubt about it.
And hopefully we'll figure out something sooner than later on this All-A Classic Kentucky 2A Championship conundrum that we're in.
Stay tuned for that, and we'll as soon as we know more, we will bring it to you. That's going to wrap up this edition of the Sideline Report, brought to you by the Times Leader here in your hometown radio station, WPKY The Tiger. For Todd Griffin, sports editor of the Times Leader, Ty Englebright, bidding you adieu for this Thursday. Have a good day, everybody. Thanks for listening to the Sideline Report, brought to you by the Times Leader, Todd Griffin, in studio to get us up to date on everything Caldwell County sports. So be sure to tune in at 9:03 every Thursday for the Sideline Report, brought to you by the Times